Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast series about valuation and business and everything in between. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a valuation expert and divorce financial mediator in St. Louis, Missouri. So today we're actually speaking about a book called Inherited Trauma and Family Wealth with Ruschelle Khanna. And she's a family advisor, a mediator, and a therapist on the East Coast. She really works with parents and families and adult children in order to live a healthy, financially secure life. And a lot of times she's working with individuals who are in the process of business succession, which is transferring those businesses to other generations, really talking about inherited trauma and specifically how it impacts like financial behaviors. So could we start off with you kind of just talking about this inherited trauma? Because again, I think that people understand that, you delve deep into your relationship patterns and styles, and it's, probably based in some of your family environment. But like this term, can we get a little bit clearer on it? And then we can talk about kind of the impact to financial behavior as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So inherited trauma does encapsulate anything that is passed down from generation to generation that is a pain point. In the book, I call them pain echoes. So they can actually be passed in DNA. So you are born with some of the pain of your ancestors literally in your DNA, and that gets expressed and held in your body. The other there's another way we get inherited trauma, and that is through parenting. So how your parents have parented you, the behavioral, the nurture, and the way where you're taken care of is also a way that trauma is passed on to another generation. So we have both the genetic, which can impact everything from our health, our metabolic processes, to the decisions that we make, the way we think about things, and then how we are raised. The other part about inherited trauma is that researchers are now learning that we can actually inherit specific memories from our ancestors. And that was what got me started in this work. I inherited an experience that was my mother's. And there are signs and ways that you can tell whether or not this was an inherited memory. For example, one way that you can tell is, when did it manifest? If it manifests at the same age that your ancestor went through the trauma, then it is more than likely an inherited trauma. I manifested an issue at 4 years old. My mother's trauma happened to her at 4 years old. And the trauma that I was experiencing was an echo of what my mother had. It wasn't a random different one. It was a grief and loss trauma, because she suffered a grief and loss at age 4. So if you have a point in your history where you think, oh, I got anxiety when I was 7 and I don't know why, that might be inherited trauma.
I think it's almost even impossible for us to totally understand this concept when we're wandering through our lives just thinking that, everything is just a decision that day, right? And so when you're going through and you're dealing with this sort of inherited trauma, how can you even initially tell, like, is this, like, is it just like it's almost from nowhere, or it's kind of unknown? Like, were you confused at whether it was your trauma or not?
Well, at age 4, I didn't know why I was having fears of death. See, age 4 is too young to be thinking about death generally. So I was afraid my dad was going to die. My mom lost her dad at age 4.
Oh,
and I was terrified of my dad dying. And I didn't even tell anybody about this until I was much older, because when you're 4, you're barely, verbal. So one way is that if it manifested at an age that maybe it shouldn't have, or there was no other extenuating circumstances around that, that is one way that we know it's an inherited pattern. And you might want to have a conversation with your family about, hey, did something happen when I was 4 or when you were 4? Or, tell me a little bit about that there. The other is if you know a family story. For example, I think in the book, there's an example of someone afraid of taxes, filing your taxes. You just have this like aversion. I don't want to get anywhere near taxes. And then as older adults, they found out that their distant relative was arrested for tax fraud a generation ago, and that rippled through the family as a shame, a big stain on the family. So those you may not know, like, why do I have an aversion to doing taxes? It's just I don't really have anxiety about anything else. Maybe there's a story back there that you're unaware of. The other is this: the story. Great grandma was an alcoholic. She neglected her finances and broke us. We were broke because of her drinking, and I have a drinking problem, and I know that's so direct, indirect, or there's an age of onset where something kind of snapped for you.